미국의 외교 정책은 주변 국가의 현재와 미래에 굉장히 지대한 영향을 미치는데요. 특히 한국은 수출, 군사 등 정치와 경제와 같은 많은 것들에 영향을 받습니다. 조 바이든 행정부의 외교 정책의 중심은 무엇이고 트럼프 행정부와 무엇이 다른지가 궁금합니다.
Joe Biden came into office believing that sort of job one in American foreign policy was to focus on China and the threat that China poses not just to the United States, but to the United States, its friends, partners, and allies, and the whole so-called rules-based order that was created after the end of World War II and then expanded after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And to that end, President Biden came into office seeking to reverse one of what he saw as the pathologies of the Trump administration, which rejected multilateralism, which was quite critical of America's friends and allies, and instead to look for ways that America could return to a more traditional American foreign policy style of working with our friends, partners, and allies, most notably South Korea. And it was no accident that President Biden had then President Moon as the second head of state to come visit the United States once he, Joe Biden, became president.
초기 바이든 행정부의 대북 정책은 많은 기대를 모았습니다. 그러나 피부로 와닿는 현실적인 움직임은 잘 보이지 않는 것 같은데요. 그 이유가 무엇이라고 보십니까?
Well, I think the simple and best answer to your question is the Biden administration doesn't see any real openings with the North Koreans at this time. As we often talk about in U.S. diplomatic circles, that being the problem of North Korea, doesn't look ripe for resolution at this time. You're quite right that when the Biden administration came into office in January of 2021, one of its first decisions was to do a strategic review of U.S. policy toward North Korea. Now that review, as best I know, has never been made public, but we have some sense of the general thrust of the review, and it was a commitment to seeking the ultimate denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. And the Biden strategy, in some sense, was sort of in between that of President Barack Obama, who Joe Biden served as vice president, and Donald Trump. As you may recall, President Obama pursued a policy of strategic patience. Basically, we won't do anything and wait for the North Koreans to come around, whereas President Trump held not one but two summit meetings with the leader of North Korea. What the Biden administration did was to say, we're not going to have any leader summits, so we're not going back to Donald Trump, but we're willing to have conversations at a working level, lower level government officials. And as best I can tell, there's been no reciprocated interest from the leadership in North Korea, and nothing has changed on that front. One other thing to keep in mind to try to understand how the Biden administration is approaching this issue is that its foreign policy inbox is very full. Again, this is an administration that came in thinking it could focus on U.S. policy toward China. And then, of course, in February of 2022, we had the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which has really created another dramatic, acute problem for the administration to handle.
과거와 다르게 통일을 향한 운전대는 한국이 잡고 있는 것 같습니다. 말씀하신 것처럼요. 지금 미국은 세계 경찰로서의 역할도 줄이고 있는 것으로 보이고요. 통일을 위해서 한국은 미국을 설득할 필요가 지속적으로 필요하다고 보십니까? 아니면 한국 자체적인 노력을 강구하는 게 맞다라고 보십니까?
Well, I would take a step back, and I don't think the United States ever acted as the world's policeman. That is not to say that the United States has not intervened militarily around the world. But I do think it is the case that the United States was the global leader, the world order that grew up after the end of World War II, and again, that was expanded after the collapse of the Soviet Union, was made possible by American power. So in that sense, when we talk about a rules-based order, we're really talking about an American-led order. But I think while the United States has long been the most powerful country in the world, a status being challenged by China today, the United States was never omnipotent. It couldn't make countries do what it wished it to do. And I think when you look at the issue of South Korea, we look at the issue of North Korea, you have a regime that is steadfastly refusing to change and to, in essence, join the rest of the global community. It has pursued an autarkic, isolationist policy, great hostility towards South Korea, and despite numerous efforts, not just by the United States, but also by the government of South Korea, to try to find some way for a rapprochement, for reconciliation, those gestures have never been returned. Instead, North Korea has built up its military forces, particularly its nuclear forces, and it poses a grave threat to South Korea, to Northeast Asia, and also to the United States. It remains a front-of-line, top diplomatic challenge for the United States. Now, from the vantage point of Washington, there had always been great hope, ever since the end of the Cold War, that China would play a very productive role in curtailing North Korea's rather aggressive and belligerent behavior. I don't think I need to go through with you all of the incidents that have come out of Pyongyang, but the Chinese have, certainly from an American point of view, I won't speak for South Koreans, not played the kind of very positive role that certainly people in Washington think that Beijing is capable of.